It's the show the establishment warned you about.
Welcome back to the Dr. Tommy Show. Thank you for joining us. Been off for a little bit. We had a busy week last week. We had a couple birthdays, several birthdays. We had kids going away to college. We have kids going away to college and one of them starting preschool. We have a interesting family. We have my wife and I together have 3 children. 2 of them are my stepchildren, her 2 children. And then we have together a child. And the oldest one is now in vet school at UF. Today Tracy's up there for a family day. And then the youngest one just started Montessori school, which is a new thing we have in Tampa in Hillsborough County, where we're broadcasting from the free state of Florida. So it's pretty interesting to have that spread. Thank you for joining us. We are, like I said, broadcasting from the free state of Florida, where we are part of the Banana Republic of the United States, but we're still an outpost of freedom in the Banana Republic that we have here recently. If you're out there and you're a patriot and you want to come in and see what we do here in concierge medicine at Echelon Health, feel free to drop by. We have influx of new patients, but we still have room for more. So if you're out there and they say when you're in business, I don't know how many out there have had a business or your family's in business or whatever, but they say in business, you're supposed to identify your ideal client. And so our ideal client, and this is not ideal, meaning we don't accept people who aren't like this. This is just who seems to be wants to join. Ideal client is someone who is a business owner or kind of not a business owner, but a manager or something like that in a business. And then also a person who has an interest in getting to root causes of health problems. And then a person who also does not want to wait, and they don't want to deal with BS. They don't want to wait on the phone. They don't want to wait for someone to call them back, and they don't want to wait for an appointment. And that's what we do here. So we're able to do all of those things here. As far as waiting, not having people wait for phone calls. We don't have to have people wait to get an appointment, and they certainly don't have to wait they certainly don't have to deal with any BS because there's no bureaucracy here. It's just us. A lot of these big corporate practices have just layer upon layer of staff, and then the staff changes, and then they say, well, I like the doctor, but I hate the staff, or I like the doctor, but I never hear back. And well, that's a function of the way the place is managed. And so that's what we don't have here. So anyway, if you're into town and you want to join us, come on by. We're just in north of Bears Avenue on Florida Avenue in Lutz, which is a part of Tampa, kind of. Anyway. Had a last week, or I think it was last weekend, saw The Godfather for the first time on the big screen, which is interesting because The Godfather came out in 1972. And so you didn't really have a chance to see The Godfather unless you were born before then, or if you were around in 92, they had a 25th year or 25-year anniversary. Not 92, whatever year it was. They had a 25-year anniversary, or maybe it was 20-year anniversary. Anyway, they had another anniversary viewing of The Godfather, which was in 1972, and they showed it in the theaters. And then just again, recently, they showed it again in the theaters for the 50th anniversary, although I did not see it then. But I was able to see it at the Tampa Theater, and it was a really cool event because the Tampa Theater, if you're not familiar with the area, is down in downtown Tampa, and it is a historic theater. I believe it was built in 1928, and there's several theaters around here that were built around the same time. One of them is a Polk Theater in Lakeland, which was built around the same time, and they all have this kind of they're theaters, they're the actual theaters, so they have balconies and mezzanines, I think they call them, and then they have the usual gathering down below theater. Anyway, they at the Tampa Theater, it's got this really interesting architecture. It looks like it's outside when you're in there because they have the roof painted with these stars in the roof, and then they have balconies, and it's just it's interesting. It's almost like if you were to transport yourself, what I think we might look back in during the times of Shakespeare when they would do the plays outside and then between the buildings and things like that. That's what it kind of looked like to me in my mind. Anyway, so we saw The Godfather which was, in my mind, the greatest movie ever made. And I include The Godfather with The Godfather 2 as one movie, because really there's part one and part two, and it truly is two parts of the same story in my mind. And so The Godfather part one and part two are together, I think, the greatest movie. And I have to say that with a caveat, because my other favorite movie is Unforgiven. So then I say, well, I have a tie for the number one movie, and it's a three-way tie between The Godfather 1, Godfather 2, and Unforgiven, which is Clint Eastwood's magnum opus Western movie. But anyway, The Godfather, back to that, I've been watching this movie or this show on Paramount Plus called The Offer, and it's about the making of The Godfather. And there's some interesting stories behind the scenes about how The Godfather was made. And really, if you look back on it, The Godfather almost did not come off because of all the different challenges that were afoot, mostly to do with production. And the history of The Godfather is it was a novel that was written by Mario Puzo in the late 60s. I believe it was 1967 when he had the manuscript, 60-page manuscript, which became the novel. And it was at that time that Robert Evans, who was the head of Paramount Plus, actually optioned that book already based on those 60 pages. And I think he paid Puzo $12,500 at the time. And Puzo apparently needed $10,000 to pay off a gambling debt. So he was kind of in a desperate situation. And I guess his agent advised him not to do it, but he did it anyway. So way back when he wrote the manuscript, before he wrote the book, they paid him this $12,500, and it went on to become very popular novel across the world, and then later became a movie. But the movie itself, when they first made it, was not to be a blockbuster. They wanted to make kind of a quick, relatively cheap movie that would make some money, but they had no intentions of making a great movie. So if you look at the history of The Godfather, the company that made it, Paramount, wanted to make it in the present time, which at that time was the 70s. So they did not want a period piece. They did not want it to be made in the 40s, which is where the book takes place. So they went back and forth with Puzo with Coppola, who was the director, Francis Ford Coppola. They went back and forth with him a little bit about it. And he demanded that it be made in the time period that it was, because it was integral to the storyline that it took place in post-war America. And he wanted to make it a movie about a family that was involved in post-war American dream and a capitalistic dream. And it could not do that if you just said, well, this is just happening now in the 70s. It's just a gangster flick, which is what Paramount wanted to do. Paramount wanted it to be a gangster flick, basically. Make money, be a gangster flick. And then what Paramount was concerned about was they wanted real Italians in it. I guess they had recently done a movie where they had, it was a gangster flick, but it was with, I believe it was with Michael Douglas's father, Kirk Douglas. And they didn't think it was authentic enough because Kirk Douglas, it was Jewish, and they felt like it didn't have the authenticity that it would if it was an Italian piece. So anyway, so they wanted to make a gangster flick. They wanted to make a gangster flick with Italians, and they also wanted it to be, very inexpensive, relatively inexpensive, but profitable. So that was the task that happened. Well, Coppola got involved with it. He started to fall in love with it. And at first he didn't want to do it because he thought the novel itself was kind of tawdry. It talked about, things that he wasn't interested in. It talked about Sonny's girlfriend in the movie, in the book, has a problem with her, not to be graphic, but she has a problem with her female parts, where she is not able to basically be satisfied but anybody but Sonny, and Sonny, who happens to be, if you have kids in the car, hung like a horse. Anyway, so the end of the story is, Coppola saw this and he's like, this is not what I'm interested in. So that part of the movie, that part of the book got cut out. And there's more in there about a guy who's a singer, and he's modeled supposedly after Frank Sinatra. And Sinatra was not very happy with that. And a lot of that got cut out. And that's another thing about the movie that was hard to, Johnny Fontaine was the name of the character, modeled after Sinatra, supposedly. Anyway, so that was another thing about making this movie that was an obstacle, is that the Italians in New York especially did not want this made. So the congressman in New York didn't want it made. Who was, I guess, where they were going to shoot the movie. The mafia didn't want it made. At that time, Joe Colombo was the head of the Colombo family, formerly the Profaci family, but now the Colombo family. And he didn't want it made because he had just started a Italian rights league. I think it's Italian American League, I think it was called. And basically it was a league that was supposed to promote the ideals of Italian Americans and show that Italian Americans were being slandered essentially in the media as mobsters, which Joe Colombo obviously was. But as it is in the mafia, which is interesting, is they deny that they are something which it actually exists. And this has been a tactic from the mafia from the very beginning. And it's kind of funny because it happens in the movies too. I remember there's a part in The Godfather where Michael has shot and killed Sollozzo, who is the captain of the police department, who was corrupt, who was in he killed the police captain who was in with Sollozzo, who was the Turk, who was the opium guy who's trying to get Vito Corleone to back him. Anyway, so Michael kills the police captain and he kills Sollozzo at a dinner. Then he is whisked away and goes to live in Sicily until things blow over. Well, then, the Godfather gets out of the hospital. He survives this assassination attempt, and he's out there talking to the commission. It's the commission, which is all the heads of the 5 families plus all the families from across the country. And he's talking, and he says, and there's other reasons. I have to have my son return from these made-up charges against him that he murdered this police captain, which is clearly what he did. And everybody sitting at the table knows he murdered the police captain because they're in the mafia. It's just funny. This is part of the mafia where they just deny that it exists or deny that things that are true happen. It's kind of like doublethink. And so that existed with Joe Colombo. And that's the reason for the Italian American League. Anyway, so Colombo was against it. There was local congressmen that were against it. The studio didn't want to make it the way it was made. And yet through all of this, you have to give Coppola credit. And really, Coppola is probably the only reason that is a great movie that we're talking about now. Because if it was been any other director, who knows what would have happened? Number of those things would have maybe made the movie not ever happen, or make it to a movie that is not what we talk about as The Godfather today. A great movie. It might have been, some throwaway movie that it'd be one of those things that you find on Netflix and you never even realized it was made. So all those things happened, but yet they were still able to make The Godfather. And The Godfather went over budget. And that was the big thing that the studio did not want, is The Godfather to go over budget. And it did go over budget. But boy, did it make a damn lot of money. And it made so much money that after a couple of years, they made another one. And it was such a successful movie from a standpoint of cinema. It launched the career of Al Pacino, definitely. If The Godfather hadn't been made, if it wasn't for Coppola, I do not think Al Pacino would be who Al Pacino is today. Now, he would have still been a good actor, potentially. He may have been, as good. It would have definitely been a different trajectory. He would have never been known as Michael Corleone, potentially, because that's the other thing is Coppola wanted Al Pacino to play Michael Corleone. For some reason, he had this desire that Michael be portrayed by Al Pacino. They wanted Robert Redford. They wanted Ryan O'Neal, they meaning the studio. They wanted, I think they even wanted Jack Nicholson potentially, who had been an Easy Rider. So anyway, this movie is a great movie. And then we recently lost Jimmy Caan, who was the Sonny. And Sonny happens to be, or James Caan happens to be, I believe he's half Jewish. So he was not Italian. Duvall was not Italian, but he didn't play an Italian character. But Coppola was Italian. Pacino was Italian. Marlon Brando wasn't Italian. But they wanted to have an authentic feel to it, and they wanted it to be an Italian movie, which it was. And it turned out to be a really good movie that celebrated. I think it celebrates Americanism. That you can build yourself up from nothing. That's one of the things it shows, and it also represents how power corrupts. It also is a movie that shows that where loyalty is very important. And where disloyalty is very dangerous and treachery is very dangerous and it can get you killed, as it got Tessio killed at the end of Godfather 1. So Godfather 1 and Godfather 2 together, I think, are the greatest movie ever made. And Godfather 2, not to go too far into detail, takes part of the Godfather novel that was not used and makes it into one half of the movie. And then there's a flash forward, a current time movie. So the Godfather 1 is the 1940s and it ends in the 50s. Godfather 2 has a part of the story that picks up right after Godfather 1. So at the end of Godfather 1, they move to Las Vegas, and the Godfather 2 picks up when they're in Las Vegas, okay? Then there's another part of the story which goes back to the early 1900s. I believe it starts in 1902 when the Godfather, original Godfather, the one played by Marlon Brando, Vito Corleone, is a child, and his mother loses her husband and her other older child to this local mafia, Sicilian mafia captain or boss, and she wants to save her last child, and they try to kill him, and he survives, and he escapes to New York through Ellis Island and starts off the family in New York that way. So the second movie, Godfather 2, one of the things that makes it great is the way that Coppola is able to go back and forth between these two time periods seamlessly and also complementary, showing the rise of one Godfather, Vito Corleone, and the fall of the other Godfather. So although Michael Corleone, I don't want to give away too many spoilers, you guys haven't seen it, Michael Corleone wins in the end, and he also loses in the end. And he loses personally, wins professionally, I guess you could say. So anyway, the two of them taken together, a great movie. Godfather 1, Godfather 2. Godfather 3 is an okay movie. It is nowhere near as good as the others. And the only reason it's a good movie or maybe an okay movie is because of Pacino, because of Vincent Mancini, who is blanking on the character's name right now, or the actor's name. But anyway, because of Vincent Mancini character, which is the Sonny's illegitimate child. And they really missed out on having Robert Duvall in it because Robert Duvall did not get a suitable salary, so he decided he was not going to be in The Godfather 3. And if they had Robert Duvall in it, I think The Godfather 3 would have been much better and potentially, if not as good as the others, much more along the level of the others, because the others are just head and shoulders above The Godfather Part 3. And so anyway, so the guys, Andy Garcia, why didn't I think of that? Anyway, Andy Garcia played Vincent Mancini. So because of Andy Garcia, because of Al Pacino, and because of the nostalgia, Godfather 3 is a good movie, maybe a good movie. Godfather 1 and 2 are great movies, greatest of all time. Okay, that's enough for The Godfather. I just wanted to run that by you. This week has been the hellacious week for Americans who are valuing their freedom, who value truth and honesty in government, who want for their children for there to be a fair way forward for those of us who happen to dissent. I was reading this thing on the yesterday about the Sex Pistols, and it was one of the people in the Sex Pistols who said, I've lived long enough now to see that the left, which used to be anti-authoritarian and anti-establishment, is now the establishment, authoritarian, and the right is anti-establishment. So now it is basically, if you want to be a punk now, the punk culture, a true punk culture now is to be on the right or on the conservative side or on the limited government side, however you want to slice it. The libertarian side. The establishment is the left. The left is the one with the boot on the throat of Americans. The left is the one who wants to make everyone homogeneous as far as their political beliefs. The left is the one who will not tolerate dissent. The left is the one who denies freedom under the guise of giving freedom. And so what happened in Mar-a-Lago this week is, obviously on the news everywhere, is a completely disgusting example of what happens when your society breaks down. when your government is no longer governing by the consent of the people, and when there's no longer rule of law, when there is rule by man, when man is law, there is no rule of law. The Constitution is not anything other than a faded document which you can refer to when it's convenient and completely ignore when it's most of the time. And so this search of Donald Trump's residence at Mar-a-Lago, purportedly for documents that were wanted by the National Archivist. So this is the craziest damn thing I've ever heard. The purported reason for this, and we don't even know because the what they call it, the warrant is sealed. So even his lawyer, get this, even the president. Now this is the president of the United States. Granted, just a year ago or 2 years ago, the president of the United States, who was president 2 years ago, this man was able to have his home raided, his lawyer kicked out. He did not see the warrant. He was not present when they did it. And for 9 hours, they went through his house and they tried to make him turn off their cameras, tried to make the people who were running security turn off the cameras at Mar-a-Lago. And it's reported that they didn't. They said, no, we're not going to do that. Anyway, so this is what can happen to the president of the United States or former president of the United States. Can you imagine what can happen to you if you get on the wrong side of the law? Is there anybody out there who believes if for some reason they got on the wrong side of someone who was of the law, whether it be the Department of Justice or your local government, that you can stand a chance, that you will ever have a free trial or a fair trial or fair investigation? This is what's happened. And if you think, well, you know, that they wanted to find some, this is a fishing expedition. And this is the same fishing expedition that has been started since the day Donald Trump descended down the escalator. And, you know, it was on Gateway Pundit. They said Scott Adams posted this on Twitter. And Scott Adams is the guy who writes Dilbert. He says, if you believe Trump squirreled away some nuclear secrets, so that's the latest thing that they said. This was Washington Post. And so shortly after Merrick Garland talked yesterday about, I didn't even watch it, I heard about it. Anyway, he's talked about how, you know, they were doing this for whatever the hell reason. But he said, you know, the Department of Justice speaks through its releases only. Basically, they don't leak. And then within minutes, Washington Post is out with a story that the reason that they went down there was because Donald Trump had stolen the nuclear codes. Okay, so this is Scott Adams says. He goes, if you believe Trump squirreled away some nuclear secrets at Mar-a-Lago and refused to return them because you heard that the Washington Post say two anonymous sources that CNN can't confirm told him it was true, I can give you some useful context. He goes, how many of these hoaxes do you still believe are true? The Russian collusion hoax, Steele dossier hooker story, Russia paying bounties on U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan, Trump calling neo-Nazis, quote, fine people, Trump suggested drinking or injecting bleach to fight COVID, Trump overfed koi fish in Japan, Trump cleared protesters with tear gas for a Bible photo op, Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation. Elections are fair because no court found major fraud. January 6th was an insurrection to overthrow the government, a quote insurrection to overthrow the government. Trump tried to grab the steering wheel of the beast, which they said that, you know, Trump was so out of his mind on January 6th, he choked Secret Service man and then tried to commandeer his Secret Service vehicle or limousine so that they could drive him to lead his insurrectionists. So this is the thing is, this is a long line, and this is the latest episode in the effort to get Trump. And it's not Trump they're trying to get. Trump is the guy who is the face of a movement. But they're after people who do not who think that Trump is not a bad guy. So you don't even have to not like Trump. I'm sorry, you don't even have to be a Trump follower. You don't have to be a Trump voter. All you have to be is someone who does not detest Trump and they're after you. They do not want people like you to exist. So if you're a Trump supporter, you're definitely on the list. But you also have to believe this stuff. All these things that I just said. Russian collusion hoax, Steel Hooker dossier, all that. Trump called Nazis or neo-Nazis fine people. If you don't believe all of those things, then you're a target too, because they have to have you submit to their will, political will, that you believe what they say, so they can go on their quest to do what they want to do. And what do they want to do is just impose bigger and bigger government. That's all they want to do. That's all they ever want to do is make the government bigger, the individual smaller. But if this can happen to the president, former president of the United States, what the hell can happen to you? And it's funny because, not funny, it's scary. They just passed this, this, what do they call it? The Inflation Reduction Act, which is the craziest title for a bill recently, because clearly it's not going to reduce inflation if you're injecting more and more money into the system, which causes inflation. So they're going to put 800 billion, what did I say, million? 800 million used to be a lot of money. 800 billion is almost nothing now. $800 billion is going to be injected into the government, largely into Green New Deal things. So all you people out there who own Green New Deal stocks are going to benefit from this, which is what the Green Movement's all about, is enriching people who have the right connections. Anyway, under the guise of saving everyone, under the guise of saving the planet. Anyway, so this Green New Deal, part of this is they're going to hire 87,000 IRS agents, part of this new Inflation Reduction Act. And the reason they need them, they say, is because they got to go find all of those tax cheats out there. They got to find all those loopholes that are being utilized. And they're gonna shake down everybody, and they're gonna get that money that we need, and they're gonna raise taxes on those individuals who aren't paying taxes. And there's a study that showed that this probably is not going to happen, and it said that basically that the chances of you having an audit, if you are among those who are making less than 400,000, according to the state, according to Biden, is that it's not going to happen. But there is estimates that the large part of that enforcement is going to come from those making under $75,000 a year. And it says here that Commissioner Reddick, this is on Blaze, Commissioner Reddick insists that the 87,000 additional IRS agents will not be used to increase audit scrutiny on small businesses or the middle class. And that is not true, because there is a... here it is. Senator Ted Cruz shared a similar sentiment. He said, they're not being created to audit billionaires or giant corporations. They're being created to audit you. The House Ways and Means Committee, the minority, has put out an estimate under this bill that there will be 1.2 million new audits this year, with 700,000 of those new audits falling on taxpayers making $75,000 or less. So let me read that again. So he's talking to... He's talking to, who's he talking to? I don't know. He's talking to someone. But he said that the House Ways and Means Committee, the minority, so the minority, which is the Republicans on the House Ways and Means Committee, has put out an estimate that under this bill, there will be 1.2 million new audits this year, with over 700,000 of those new audits falling on taxpayers making less than $75,000 a year, which is a hell of a lot of people out there. And so what does that mean? That means that these audits are going to come in. Given that we know how they have weaponized the IRS in the past, with Lois Lerner specifically, with the slow walking of conservative nonprofit applications being slow walked, that's going to be a drop in the bucket compared, or that's going to be a speck on elephant's ass compared to what they're going to do with this 87,000 new agents. 87,000 new agents. And if you think that they're not going to search for people based on their political affiliation, based on the fact that we know the IRS historically, like I said, through Lois Lerner, has a political agenda, what is a chance that they're not going to use this to further enforce their stranglehold on the political system that they've already done through politicizing and prosecuting people for their political beliefs? So the people who are January 6 protesters or insurrectionists, people who agree with anything that Donald Trump has to say are going to be potentially insurrectionists. I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to set it up, and they've been trying to do this since January 6th, to make it seem like if you do not go along with the political winds of their day, meaning that you do not follow what they believe is politically correct, they meaning the establishment, then you're going to be viewed as a threat, and you're going to be potentially someone who can be arrested for inciting violence or for causing an insurrection or any of the other stuff they come up with, like they're holding these people in the January 6 gulags, or they're going to shake you down the other way through these 87,000 IRS agents. Could you imagine that if you were doing something like I'm doing right now on out in the open talking about them, that there's not going to be some way to track that down and then come after you? If you don't believe that can happen, then you're very naive, and I applaud your what's the word for it? I applaud your optimism. What else? The reason that they're after Trump is because he terrifies them, and Trump, like I said, Trump is not the reason that they're terrified. If Trump happens to not run, okay, so if Trump doesn't run in 2024, let's say something happens, he gets sick, or he just says, you know what, it's not worth it. I'm not going to spend the last years of my life fighting these idiots. I'm just going to retire, and I'm going to be left alone, hopefully, and that's what will happen. Well, someone's going to take his spot, because Trump did not make this movement. This movement made Trump. I honestly believe that. Now, I'm not saying that Trump is not sincere. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that Trump was part of the movement. Trump is a part of the movement. He's amongst the people who believed what he believed. There are a lot of people out there who believe this. There's a lot of people out there. Let me just broadly say what I think Trump believes and what a lot of people believe. I believe that Trump believes, and a lot of people believe, that there are elites out there. Okay? Those elites exist in government. Those elites exist in business. Those elites exist in academia. Those elites exist in the media. Those elites exist in entertainment. And what these elites want is something that is not necessarily in the interest of everyday Americans. What they want is things that are in the interest of them. So people who have a lot of money aren't necessarily interested in whether or not you have a job in the United States. They aren't not necessarily interested in whether or not your job is a good paying job. They're interested in profits, for sure. And they say, well, if the companies are doing good, the stock market's doing good, then everybody's doing good, because everyone has a 401k purportedly. But what they don't really care about is like what we see in COVID happen, is that there's manufacturing here in the United States. So we aren't at the behest of communist China to get damn face masks, which is what happened, where we do not have to depend on other countries to produce the vast majority of our medicines, India and China, where we have a way to manufacture and do things in America that doesn't make us dependent on others. And speaking of dependency, energy that came from the ground, energy that is here, energy that is much more efficient than the renewable energy that they talk about, meaning solar and wind. Energy that is made from the carbon bonds in carbon, in fossil fuels. Those breaking those bonds releases so much energy, and it's put on here through by God or by happenstance, if you happen to believe that. Either way, it's here, and it's efficient, and it's not causing the Earth's climate to change in and of itself. It is not the reason why there's flooding or disasters, despite what the people who are in the green movement have to say, because The Green Movement is part of the elites because the Green Movement has decided this is going to be where we're going to stake our trade. We're going to make our money off of this Green Movement. We're going to make our money off of trading, what do they call them, energy credits. We're going to make our money off investing in these green energy. We're going to make our money investing in batteries and solar power and all this. So it's just a way for them to make more money. So Donald Trump believes that elites necessarily aren't looking out for you, but elites are controlling things. And he also believes that the government is not is too big. The government's too intrusive. And those are the kinds of things that Donald Trump believes. And that's what makes Donald Trump the person who they want to target, because he is energizing people who believe that same thing to speak up and to vote, and not to vote for people like, Republicans who are the old-fashioned Republicans, like, these guys that are just, they're just there to go along to get along. They're there for one election cycle into the next. And if they win, they happen to win. If they happen to lose, well, they're going to give a damn good a loser speech, which is what Mitt Romney specialized in, and John McCain. They just give this great reach across the aisle speech about being a loser and how they're just going to support the new president, despite the fact that they just got their ass kicked by him, and they're just going to lose with such grace. And that's what makes a good Republican. How gracefully can you lose? What kind of loser speech can you give? Can you give a good loser speech? We'll nominate you to be president. And that's what they used to do until Donald Trump came along. And that's what they hate. They hate the fact that Donald Trump is he is, even though he is not a conservative by nature necessarily, he espouses conservative principles. He espouses small government principles, and he espouses individual liberty principles. And they do not like the fact that he does that, and he does it effectively, but he also energizes people, common people, regular people, to do that, because they do not need that. The establishment does not need that. And the establishment's the Republicans, and the establishment's the Democrats. The political parties that control our government, the Democrats and Republicans, are two parts of the same problem. They are the uniparty. The establishment uniparty is what the Republicans are. And Donald Trump is effectively a third party person, even though he ran as a Republican and the Republicans nominated him. He is effectively a third party president. And what those two groups can't have is an upstart group, a third way. And that's what the people who if you ask any Trump supporter, if they are a Republican because they just love the Republican Party, or they're a Republican because they don't want to be a Democrat, most of them will say they're Republican, they don't want to be a Democrat. But anyway, that's just more of the reason that this thing that happened in Florida is scary, and that there has to be something done to stop this. And the answer is, well, you're going to go vote. There also is another answer that you have to do, because voting, as we saw, can help a little bit. Voting helped to put Trump in office, and voting helped and allowed Trump to appoint Supreme Court judges. So the voting has its role. But the real way that we're going to have to get through this is through education, making people understand that there is a problem. That it's not just like, well, it's okay that they rated Donald Trump because, I'm a Democrat, so it's cool that they rated Donald Trump. I don't think it would be cool for me if Donald Trump raided Hillary Clinton's house for no damn good reason. I really don't. I mean, honestly, I could say that I don't really think that I would believe that is a good idea. And I think there's a lot of people out there who are on the Democrat side or liberals or leftists probably don't care. Leftists would like it if they raided Donald Trump and maybe put him in chains and then locked him away forever, along with the January 6 people. But liberals, meaning Democrats or people who are not conservative, I think they also do not like the fact that this happened, and you're seeing that. All right, this is a little bit more about government. It says here, this is the Supreme Court just took up a monumental case. This is from patriotjournal.org. It says, from Fox News, Well, it says, the Supreme Court has already made history this summer, has given numerous rulings that have restored rights to both states and citizens, but it doesn't seem to be done yet. As the fall season begins to take shape, we've discovered there could be an end to a 40-year policy that puts millions of students at a disadvantage. And it goes, from Fox News, the U.S. Supreme Court announced it would hear one of two cases on October 31st that could dismantle the 40-year-old precedent of race-based affirmative action in university admissions. Students for Fair Admissions, Inc. versus Presidents and Fellows of Harvard College is one of two cases to come before the Supreme Court, urging the court to eliminate race as an admissions factor and as a result overturn the precedent case Grutner versus Bollinger. So this is big news, and it is big news because it's one of those things that is underpinning what is a fundamentally dishonest policy, and that is that affirmative action is somehow righting a wrong and helping people at the same time. And affirmative action at its very core is about discrimination. And discrimination in a bad way. You can discriminate. Discrimination, all discrimination means is really what discrimination means is telling the difference between two things. But people discriminate all the time. We make it seem like discrimination in and of itself is a sin and should not be done. But the late Walter Williams used to say that, when he was marrying and he was in the market for being, he was a bachelor and he was in the market for a wife, he said he discriminated. He discriminated against white women for one. And he said he also discriminated against women who weren't attractive. And so when he chose his wife, he purposely discriminated against white women and women he didn't think were attractive. And that's how he got his wife. So anyway, the idea that discrimination in and of itself is a bad thing is the way we've changed language to say discrimination equals bad. But anyway, back to the point is, the affirmative action is true discrimination based on skin color. And so you say, well, it's necessary because there's so much racism out there. And if we don't have affirmative action, then these people are never going to have a chance, which is bull crap. And why the reason is bull crap is because skin color now, today in society, is not the major determining factor whether or not you succeed or not. However, I will say this. Skin color is the major determining factor whether you be exploited by a politician. That may change soon. It may be whether or not your penis has been transgendered or not, because that's becoming the new thing that the politicians want to exploit, is whether or not your gender has changed. But for the most part, politicians love to exploit people based on their skin color. And they love to use skin color as a way to divide people against each other and a way to reward one group and punish another group, all the same time while seeming to be holier than thou. And so this affirmative action, what it does is it says, look, because of historical racial injustice, now certain people of a certain skin color are going to get a step up, and people who are a different skin color are going to get a step down. And it's entirely offensive to someone who is being discriminated against, and it should be offensive to those people who are supposedly being helped. Why do I say that? I see this all the time. I turn on the TV, for instance, and I'm going through Paramount Plus, let's say, and I'm looking through, and it's got all the different categories, and it's got Westerns, and it's got new releases, and it's got action, and then it's got black voices or black stories or whatever. And so you're like, okay, so this is a collection of stuff about people who have a darker skin color, black people, right? So you click on it, and usually it has some type of preface that says, we are going to amplify. Well, another thing they say, they're going to amplify their voice. We are boosting these people up. We are showing that the black artists out there deserve to be heard, and we're promoting them. So what is that saying? Is that saying that if not because of Paramount Plus putting the special thing in there, that no one would have watched that? So what is that saying that Paramount Plus thinks about their black entertainers? Or people who have made movies that are black, who are now in their category as black voices or black stories. Is that not degrading to me? I mean, to me, I'm not black, but I can see how that could be. I, as a person who, I don't know, I am what I am. I don't even think about it. I never think about what color I am. I honestly say that. I never think about what color I am. Anyway, I'm not white. I'm not black. Whatever I am, I am. But the idea that if I were to turn on a Paramount Plus, and then it says here, Pacific Islander voices, and then we're going to help Pacific Islanders, because if it wasn't for us, then nobody would watch their crappy movies. But because we're pumping up these Pacific Islanders, maybe at one point they're going to be good enough to be viewed on par with the rest of the categories we have here. But until then, we're going to call them out by skin color, and we're going to amplify their voices. So they think that boosting people up by singling them out for special attention, saying they're not good enough on their own, is somehow a positive thing. Does not make any sense to me. So the same thing with affirmative action. So let's say that Pacific Islanders were a preferred minority group. They are not. Let's say that they were. When I applied to medical school and they accepted me, I would want them accepting me on my merits, not because of my skin color. In actual fact, Pacific Islanders and Asians are not included, which is a hilarious thing. So they say, look, we're going to include people based on their skin color, right? But we're not going to include everybody based on their skin color. So we're going to discriminate against white people. We've already said that with affirmative action. But we're also going to discriminate against non-white people who aren't our people that we favor. So the people that are favored, who are called underrepresented minorities, we're going to favor those. So if you're Hispanic, if you're, I think it's Native Alaskan, if you're Native American, if you are black, if you are Hispanic, I don't know if I already said that. Anyway, those are the underrepresented minorities that you can benefit from your skin color, that these nice people are going to just pat you on the head and say, okay, now, Tommy, because of your skin color, we're going to give you a little extra help, because we know because of that, without us, you couldn't have made it. So we're just going to give you a little bit of extra help, and you're going to get into college now. And these other people aren't going to make it. So the Supreme Court now is going to hear about this, and I hope they get rid of it. It's one of those things not now, it still is. It's one of these things that you think of in life that are just going to be forever, even though if you don't like them. And the other one is abortion on demand. And that went away, Roe v. Wade. This idea that you can just have an abortion, that abortion is nothing more than late birth control, essentially. Killing as a means of birth control. That's gone away, thankfully, at a federal level, not on the state level. But as a federal constitutional right, you no longer have the chance to just say, well, because of the federal constitutional right to use birth control, aborting a human, a live person, live fetus as birth control. You can't do that anymore. Anyway, that was one thing that I thought would never go away potentially. And then the other thing is this affirmative action, which is inherently unfair. It's unfair. I don't care if I was a person who would benefit from affirmative action or not. I think it's unfair that people are treated differently based on their skin color. I think it's absolute bull crap. What's next? This is scary. This is from Daniel Horowitz from the Conservative Review. I knew this was coming. Horowitz, study of young boys after vax, meaning the so-called vaccine, coronavirus, after vax shows cataclysmic prevalence of heart problems, blows up sudden death theory. So it says here, a new preprint study from Thai researchers confirms those suspicions in spectacular fashion with sickening ramifications. And they're talking about this reported cases of myocarditis and pericarditis in bears. And they said there's 50,000 reported cases of it. VAERS is where you go to report if you have an adverse effect, if you have a vaccine, okay? It says they're likely underreported. Well, this says a preprint from the Thai researchers confirms these suspicions in spectacular fashion with sickening ramifications. Researchers conducted in-depth cardio surveillance of 301 adolescent children. 202 were boys. They got jabbed and followed up for 14 days after the second dose of Pfizer. The results were mind-blowing. 7 of the 202 boys, 3.5%, developed clinical or subclinical myocarditis or pericarditis. So myocarditis is swelling of the heart, inflammation of the heart. Pericarditis is swelling of the lining of the heart. Either one of them is not good and potentially can be fatal. It says this is not 1 in 5,000 or 1 in 10,000 as we were led to believe, which was bad enough. This equals 1 in 28 for all teenage boys jabbed. Okay. It says, and remember, Moderna has been proven to be even worse for heart inflammation, likely because it contains 3 times the dose of Pfizer. So this study, this preprint study from the Thai researchers show that in their study, 3.5% of the boys who had the Pfizer vaccine, quote unquote vaccine, developed subclinical myocarditis or pericarditis. And so what's that happen? What does that mean? So, well, we can extrapolate that and say, well, if this is true, then out there's a lot of people who are going to get myocarditis or pericarditis or have it right now and may not even know it. And it says this should not be surprised. It says because in the study that they did for approving the Pfizer vaccine, they said the following. It says, in the pharmacovigilance plan review addendum for Comirnaty, the FDA, which is the Pfizer vaccine, the FDA conceded, pages 3 and 4, quote, incidents of subclinical myocarditis and potential long-term sequelae following Comirnaty are unknown. However, they did know that a previous study on smallpox vaccine, quote, suggested an incidence of possible subclinical myocarditis based on cardiac troponin T elevation 60 times higher than the incidence rate of overt clinical myocarditis. So they said that there were 60 times more people with myocarditis in this study on smallpox, and it was 60 times higher than clinical myocarditis. So where they said someone comes in the office and they say, oh, damn, you got myocarditis, versus people are out there walking around like, I just kind of got some indigestion today. Well, 60 times more of those people with the subclinical, not necessarily known myocarditis existed in this study on smallpox. And they're saying, look, we did not do any studies on this for our study, but here it is, just in case. Here's some background evidence of what happened in another study on a smallpox vaccine. And so what do? As you say, and Horowitz did this, he goes, it's 60 times greater. If you do the math, that equals 1 in 17 individuals for the highest risk group, aka men and young boys. It says, they asked Pfizer to complete a study on subclinical myocarditis, but it won't be completed for another year, long after they pressured and sometimes mandated any teenage boy to get the shot if they wants to join the military, go to college, go to medical school, or compete in sports. It says there are schools in America still requiring children to get this dangerous shot. Meanwhile, Denmark won't even make shots available for children anymore. So anyway, they're basically saying that based on this study, this preprint study from Thai researchers, they say that those kids, 3.5%, showed subclinical myocarditis or pericarditis. The Pfizer study, which is not going to be done for another year now, the initial study when they approved the vaccine did not include any incidents of, or did not include numbers regarding the incidence of subclinical myocarditis or potential long-term sequelae, because they didn't have the time to do it. And so now they're going to have this study come out in a year. It will be interesting to see what comes out in another year. Honestly, I believe that they rushed this shot out, and the reason they rushed it out is to make money. Honestly, I believe that. I'm not a conspiracy theorist per se, but when you look at the amount of money that was made by these vaccine makers, and if you combine that with the way that they were able to use this power to force people to do things, I don't know what the reason was for them if they weren't getting paid by these vaccine makers, but I think people overall enjoy making others do things that they think are right. And I think the experts and the regulators and people who forced vaccines on people enjoyed doing that. And I think they oversold the vaccine, which is what's been said. Obviously, Dr. Birx said that. Those were her exact words. We oversold the vaccine. And they lied about the vaccine. And they lied. When did they lie? They lied when they said, this vaccine is going to prevent you from getting COVID. What was it? Dr. Fauci said, the vaccine makes COVID have a dead end. If it gets to you, it has a dead end. That's what Fauci said. Completely false. Completely false. Yet that was the word of the day not too long ago, maybe 1 year ago. And so they say that the vaccine is not going to stop, is not going to let you pass COVID on. That's false. The vaccine is going to protect you now from serious death. Lots of people dying with the vaccine. It's really unknown if the vaccine does anything, honestly, beyond some very short-term rise in the antibodies. And at this point, the vaccine is doing a rise in antibodies for a spike protein, which is, as far as we can tell, probably extinct. So the spike protein that the vaccine makes you have is for the original virus, which is most likely mutated now beyond the recognition from that spike. I don't know if that's true or not, but the assumption is the spike protein, the virus that they use to make this is no longer really, it's not the Omicron. We know that. And so what did they do? They pushed this vaccine out there. They used the scare of COVID to push out ballots to win an election here. They used it across the world for governments to lock people down. I can't explain to you why they did what they did, because I don't think about things the way they think about. I don't see trying to control people. I don't understand that logic, but I do know that I think in the bottom of my heart that there's going to be things come out about this vaccine later. And it's funny, they have Dr. Fauci, of all people, and I think it was the 80s. Maybe he was defending why he didn't have a HIV vaccine at the time. But anyway, Dr. Fauci was saying, well, we could give this vaccine, but we don't know what the side effects will be now, and especially down the road. So even him then was admitting that he didn't know what would happen with the vaccine. So anyway, I hope that there's not going to be, excuse me, I hope there's not going to be any widespread problems with the vaccine, but there exists that danger out there that there's this other shoe that's going to drop, and we don't know if that's going to drop now. We don't know if it's ever going to drop. Hopefully it never drops, but there is this worry out there. You know, they talk about the vaccine too. It also interferes with menstrual cycles now. They're admitting this. Before they didn't admit it, but now they're admitting it. They're saying it interferes with menstrual cycle. It's not that big a deal. It makes a cycle a little bit longer, maybe makes it come earlier. And but before they were denying this happened, but now it's actual something they're talking about. But it makes you think, well, if that happens, why does that happen? Because they say the spike protein doesn't go anywhere. They say spike protein gets made, your body gets exposed to it, and that's the end of the story. But if people are developing menstrual irregularities, does that mean the spike protein is somehow interfering with the ovaries? I mean, no one's talking about this from the establishment, and it's likely we're never going to hear from them until after the fact, and they're forced to admit what's happened. And I hope that it doesn't happen, that myocarditis and pericarditis is a big thing from vaccines, and it has long-term sequelae. It is likely that it has killed a lot of people, a lot more than we know of. And it is likely that those people never received informed consent, which is also a wrong thing to do. And hopefully after all this is said and done, there will be some more people who are educated about things about government, and they look at government with a jaundiced eye whenever they come out pushing these things, and pushing so without offering any explanation other than you have to do it because we say you need to do it, is exactly what they did with COVID and all these vaccines and all this other stuff. Anyway, that's it for today. If you would like to join us, go to drtommy.com/podcast, and you can see our old episodes. And if you want to come in and see us, go to drtommy.com, and then you can see where we're at in Tampa, and we're welcome to see you. We'll be glad to see you, all you patriots out there. Until next time, bye-bye.